Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausam Pereira. A day after over 40 Central Reserve Police Force personnel were killed in the deadliest terror attack on security forces in Jammu and Kashmir, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and top ministers held a security review meeting. Prime Minister Modi said those behind the terror attack would pay a very heavy price and added that they made a huge mistake. Union Minister Arun Jaitley said that the government has decided to take all possible diplomatic steps to ensure complete isolation of Pakistan. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze how Pakistan should be isolated. Joining me on the program today are G. Parthasarthi, former ambassador, Ashok Sajanhar, former ambassador as well, and Sreeram Chaulia, Dean, Jindal School of International Affairs. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Professor Chaulia, why has it taken us this long? I mean, when you hear of most favored nation, that's certainly not Pakistan.
Yeah, I mean, we had some exports going and we didn't want those to be disrupted. I mean, even though it was small, as Ambassador was saying, it's little less than 2 billion is what we were exporting to them every year. So there is also the Indus Waters Treaty. I mean, whenever we have these, dastardly terrorist attacks sponsored by our neighbor, we talk about, probably cancelling that, and then other measures, of course, we talk about military, surgical strikes and so on. But I want to mention a few ideas put out on the table. See, first one, I think, is there is a case for economic sanctions against rogue states and rogue actors. And we have not really mobilized international opinion around that, principle to say, here is a country that is like pariah, that is already isolated in many ways, but it's got, significant Chinese backing and is receiving Chinese investment. And remember, the Chinese have not been coy about sheltering rogue states for strategic reasons, be it North Korea, Myanmar or Pakistan, because they believe through all these means they are able to project power in Asia and beyond. So that is, I think, the big sticking point really for us now. Frank, how do we get the Chinese on board? Already today the word has come that again the Chinese are denying that they need to do anything to go against Masood Azhar with the sanctions in the UN counterterrorism sanctions list. And so the question again comes back to how are we able to really bring the Chinese around? The Chinese talk about we should all cooperate as a region and root out the menace of terrorism. But that's a very generic thing, right? So we need to really work on this. I think that's a very central way to be able to put pressure on the Pakistanis. The other thing, we have not explored the international legal route. Now, you go back to 1984, Nicaragua filed against the United States for financing Contra terrorists to try and overthrow the regime in Nicaragua, and the International Court of Justice actually upheld the Nicaraguan plea and found the United States guilty of violating the sovereignty of Nicaragua. Of course, it's a different matter that the US wiggled out of this whole decision using its position in the UN Security Council as a permanent member and as a superpower. But what I'm trying to say is that we should explore some newer means to be able to corner Pakistan other than the usual ones. I mean, MFN is more like a pinprick in terms of hurting the Pakistani economy. So ultimately we have to look, and I think Ambassador Parthasarthi is right that it is time now to really for us to create a permanent mechanism for countering this menace. It's like, what happens every time there's an attack, for a few months we talk about pressure, and then we let go of it. So there is an issue where, we try to treat it as a political management rather than as a long-term strategic threat. And I think if we have a view that this is an enemy state that keeps on doing this to us and cannot get any better in terms of persuasion or through diplomacy alone, then we have to think about a full spectrum means of being able to corner it and maintaining a permanent. I would even suggest, I think Prime Minister Modi should go out and create a kind of a special envoy mechanism whose only duty is to travel around the world and simply keep on building up the pressure using all these ideas that I'm suggesting and many others which I'm sure the government has in its mind. Because we need to have some kind of a continuous, I would say, a campaign that is not, it's a medium to long-term strategic threat and not something that we are just waiting for the next election and then we'll wait for and we'll get another attack on us.
It can't be
it can't be reactive.
Nature,
it has to be a continuous proactive mechanism to put pressure on this rogue state.
One quick closing comment from you, Professor Chaulia, before I end the program.
Frank, we are in the digital era. There are airwaves, there are cyber means of countering this threat as well. See, if a youth in Pulwama can be mobilized by Jaish-e-Mohammed Whether he has crossed over to the other side for training or not, we are not sure. But even without that, if they are able to do that, we have also a means to do a counter-offensive, taking on forward from what Ambassador Padsati is saying. If we are able to directly appeal to Pakistani civilians and to moderate elements there, and create a kind of a narrative about this game that the military establishment is playing, both against the interests of the Pakistani people, one, and two, against the entire region, and frankly there are a lot of people who are not happy with military domination in Pakistan, but they need to be mobilized, and it can be on ethnic sectarian lines, like what Ambassador Padsati is saying. Look at the Balochs and look at the Pashtuns and give them some more fuel to the fire. But there is another way, which is simply to look for civilian return to civilian, or establishment of civilian rule and supremacy in that country, which is the way to democracy and moderation of that country. So until that happens, I think Prime Minister Modi should be able to directly appeal to Pakistan. We should create websites, we should have like radio broadcasts. Remember, during the Cold War, it was like a long struggle and both sides used propaganda. And I don't think we are doing enough propaganda to mobilize people inside Pakistan through electronic and digital means. So I think cyber warfare has become, like the real frontier to be able to change opinions, to shift things from below. So we won't see the immediate impact of that right away, Frank, but like 5-10 years, if we are able to sow the seeds for this, for civilian control and takeover, and to downsize the military and the intelligence apparatus, which is like a state within a state in that country, and is running these kind of terror operations throughout the region, that will be a real success.
Sure.
So surgical strikes and targeted military assassination, such things we can do, but in the longer run, if we want to overcome this menace of indoctrination through the digital airwaves that is going on right now, we need to hit back in that realm and be dominant in information sphere, and that will ultimately change the scenario in our favor.
Sure. All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.